The drill sergeant's voice echoed across the training ground like thunder. "Martinez, you're the weak link in this unit." Sarah Martinez felt every pair of eyes burning into her as she struggled with the obstacle course for the third time that day. Her classmates whispered behind her back, calling her dead weight and questioning why she was even there. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Sarah was carrying a secret so classified that even her own family believed she had failed out of basic training. For 30 years, her true service record remained buried in the deepest vaults of military intelligence. But when those files were finally declassified, the world would discover that the woman they called the weak link had actually been one of the most decorated covert operatives in American military history, responsible for missions so dangerous and vital that failure would have changed the course of the Cold War forever. The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly on Fort Benning as Sarah Martinez collapsed for the second time attempting the rope climb. Her hands, raw and bleeding, couldn't maintain their grip on the coarse fibers. Around her, the other recruits moved with precision and strength that seemed to come naturally. "Martinez, what the hell is wrong with you?" Drill Sergeant Thompson's voice cut through the humid air like a blade. "My grandmother could climb that rope faster, and she's been dead for 10 years. The laughter from her fellow trainees stung worse than the Georgia heat. Private Johnson, who had sailed up the rope like it was a ladder, shook his head in disgust. "How did she even make it through the entrance requirements?" he muttered to his buddy Stevens. Sarah forced herself to her feet, her legs trembling from exhaustion. This was her 4th week of basic training, and every day brought new humiliation. Whether it was the OB, stakel course, weapons training, or even simple drill formations, she seemed to lag behind everyone else. But what hurt most wasn't the physical pain or even the constant criticism. It was the look of disappointment in her instructors' eyes, the way they had already written her off as someone who didn't belong. During chow time, she sat alone while the other recruits bonded over their shared success. They had formed tight units, watching each other's backs while she remained the outsider, the weak link that threatened to break the chain. At night, lying in her bunk, she could hear the whispered conversations about when she would finally wash out. Some had even started taking bets on how many more days she would last before quitting or being dismissed. What her fellow trainees didn't know was that 3 nights a week, long after lights out, Sarah received a different kind of training. At 0200 hours, a gentle tap on her shoulder would wake her from restless sleep. She would slip quietly from her bunk, careful not to disturb her roommates, and follow a path she had memorized through the darkened base. The building she entered looked abandoned from the outside, but inside it hummed with sophisticated equipment and personnel who never appeared during regular training hours. Here, in this classified facility, Sarah transformed into a different person entirely. Her weakness in physical training melted away as she demonstrated an extraordinary aptitude for languages, memorizing entire conversations in Russian, German, and Mandarin after hearing them just once. Her supposedly poor coordination became precise and deadly as she learned advanced combat techniques that wouldn't be taught to regular soldiers for another decade. Most remarkably, her ability to appear vulnerable and incompetent, the very trait that made her classmates dismiss her, was revealed to be a carefully cultivated skill. Colonel Rebecca Hayes, a woman whose existence wasn't acknowledged in any official military roster, watched Sarah through one-way glass as she flawlessly executed a complex infiltration scenario. "Her psychological profile is perfect," the colonel noted to her aide. "The ability to appear weak while maintaining operational excellence is incredibly rare. She doesn't just act the part, she believes it enough to fool polygraphs and experienced interrogators." These midnight sessions tested Sarah's limits in ways that regular basic training never could. She learned to withstand psychological pressure, resist interrogation techniques, and most importantly, maintain her cover identity even under extreme stress. It was during her 6th week of training, after a particularly brutal day where she had failed to complete the confidence course within the time limit, that Colonel Hayes finally revealed herself. Sarah was summoned to what appeared to be a routine counseling session for struggling recruits. She expected another lecture about not meeting standards, perhaps even discharge paperwork. Instead, she found herself face to face with a woman in civilian clothes whose presence commanded immediate respect. "Sit down, Martinez," Colonel Hayes said, her voice carrying an authority that transcended rank. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about why you're really here. Sarah's confusion must have shown on her face because the colonel smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had directed at her since arriving at Fort Benning. Your performance in regular training is exactly what we need it to be. Unremarkable, forgettable, the kind of soldier that enemies dismiss as harmless. She slid a classified folder across the desk. But your real evaluations tell a very different story. The colonel explained that Sarah had been identified and recruited for a program so secret that it didn't officially exist. Her struggles in basic training weren't failures. They were the foundation of the most important cover identity she would ever develop. In 6 months, you'll graduate with barely passing marks. Your classmates will remember you as someone who barely made it through. That's exactly the reputation you'll need when you're operating behind enemy lines. Sarah felt the weight of understanding settle on her shoulders. Everything she had endured, every moment of humiliation and self-doubt, had been preparation for something far more dangerous and vital than she had ever imagined. The colonel's final words would echo in Sarah's mind for the next 30 years. The world will never know your real name or your true service, but history will be shaped by what you accomplish in the shadows. 30 years later, the Pentagon's East Conference Room buzzed with anticipation as aging veterans gathered for what had been described as a routine declassification ceremony. Among them sat former Private Johnson, now a retired Master Sergeant, and Stevens, who had gone on to serve 3 tours in Iraq. They had been contacted by the Department of Defense and told that classified materials related to their basic training class were being released to the public. Most assumed it involved some long-forgotten training exercise or administrative detail that had been unnecessarily classified. When Sarah Martinez walked into the room, Johnson almost didn't recognize her. The frail recruit he remembered had been replaced by a confident woman in her 50s, wearing dress blues adorned with decorations he couldn't identify. "Is that really Sarah Martinez?" Stevens whispered, squinting at the woman who had once been the laughingstock of their unit. She looked different, not just older, but transformed in a way that suggested experiences far beyond anything they had shared during those grueling months at Fort Benning. The briefing officer, a young captain who seemed nervous about the materials he was about to present, cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to learn has been classified top secret for 3 decades. The person you knew as the struggling recruit Sarah Martinez was, in fact, one of the most successful covert operatives in modern military history." The room fell silent. Johnson felt his world tilt as photos appeared on the screen. Sarah in various disguises standing next to landmarks in Moscow, Berlin, and Beijing. The same woman they had mocked for failing to complete basic obstacle courses had been photographed, shaking hands with foreign officials whose identities were still redacted from the presentation. The declassified files revealed missions that read like spy novels. Operation Nightingale had Sarah infiltrating a Soviet weapons facility in 1994, posing as a clumsy American exchange student whose obvious inexperience made her invisible to security personnel. While Russian guards laughed at her struggles with the language and her apparent confusion about basic protocols, she was actually photographing classified missile guidance systems with equipment hidden in her seemingly innocent camera. In Operation Silent Thunder, she had prevented a potential international incident by intercepting communications between rogue elements in the German military who were planning to sell nuclear materials to terrorist organizations. Her cover as an incompetent translator allowed her to be present at high-level meetings where officials spoke freely, assuming she couldn't understand the technical terminology. In reality, Sarah's linguistic abilities surpassed those of professional diplomats, and she was recording and analyzing every word. Perhaps most remarkably, the files revealed that Sarah had spent 18 months living in a Chinese military compound, having convinced officials there that she was a defector whose struggles in American military training proved her disloyalty to the United States. While Chinese intelligence officers celebrated their successful recruitment of a failed American soldier, Sarah was actually feeding them carefully crafted disinformation while stealing plans for advanced radar systems. The psychological profile that had made her appear weak and unreliable to her American classmates made her the perfect double agent, someone the enemy could believe they had turned without suspecting her true capabilities. Her former drill sergeant, now retired Sergeant Major Thompson, sat in stunned silence as he learned that the recruit he had berated for weakness had single-handedly prevented 3 different assassination attempts on American officials during her covert career. As the presentation concluded, Sarah finally stood to address her former classmates. Her voice carried the same quiet determination they remembered, but now it resonated with an authority earned through decades of service they were only beginning to understand. "I know this is difficult to process," she began. "For 30 years, I've had to live with people remembering me as someone who barely belonged in the military. There were times when I wondered if the sacrifice was worth it, missing family gatherings because I was on classified missions, watching friends advance in their careers while mine remained invisible." She paused, looking directly at Johnson and Stevens, who had tormented her during those difficult months of basic training. "But everything we endured together, every moment of training, prepared me for what came after. The resilience you helped me develop, even unknowingly, saved my life more times than I can count. When I was captured during a mission in Eastern Europe, it was the mental toughness I learned from surviving your criticism that got me through 3 days of interrogation without breaking cover." The room was completely silent as Sarah continued. "The greatest honor of my career wasn't any medal or commendation. It was knowing that American families slept safely because of work they would never know happened. Operations that prevented wars before they could start, intelligence that saved lives, threats neutralized before they could materialize." She smiled, and for a moment, her former classmates could see traces of the young woman they had known. "Today, for the first time in 30 years, I can finally tell you who I really am. And more importantly, I can tell you that every one of you played a role in missions that helped keep our country safe." As the ceremony ended and people began to leave, Johnson approached Sarah with tears in his eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. "We all do." Sarah shook her head. "You gave me exactly what I needed to succeed. Sometimes the greatest service happens in the shadows, supported by people who never know the role they played." Sarah Martinez's story reminds us that heroism often wears the mask of ordinary struggle. While her classmates saw failure, military intelligence saw potential. While drill sergeants saw weakness, enemy agents saw harmlessness. Her greatest strength was the ability to appear vulnerable while remaining unbreakable, to seem forgettable while accomplishing the unforgettable. In a world where we celebrate visible achievements and obvious strength, Sarah's declassified legacy challenges us to look deeper. How many heroes walk among us, their true contributions hidden by necessity? How many people we dismiss as unremarkable are actually the invisible guardians of our freedom? The next time you encounter someone who seems to struggle, who appears to be the weak link, remember Sarah Martinez. Remember that sometimes the most extraordinary service requires the most ordinary disguise, and that the people who shape history are often those whose names will never appear in history books. To all the veterans watching this, whether your service was public or classified, whether you received recognition or remained in the shadows, your sacrifice matters. Your country remembers, even when the world cannot know. If Sarah's story has moved you, please honor all our military heroes by subscribing to our channel. Every week, we share the stories of remarkable men and women whose courage, sacrifice, and dedication have protected our freedom. Their stories deserve to be told, their service deserves to be remembered, and their legacy deserves to live on. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell because heroes like Sarah Martinez prove that the most important stories are often the ones that took decades to tell.